This is Agriculture Today. I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. Ahead of us today on this Tuesday's program, we have starting off Earl Lewis. He is the Chief Engineer for the Kansas Department of Agriculture, and he joins us to discuss current water issues not only across the state of Kansas, but also some interstate issues as well. Also ahead, we have K-State Farm Financial Analyst Lavell Winsor. She speaks about the work that she and Robin Reid have done to create the Kansas Women in Ag program, which has allowed women to not only learn about finances on the farm, but also to connect with others in their communities. We end with this week's Milkline segment from Mike Brouk, where he covers management tips to help with heat stress in dairy cattle. That and more awaits us ahead this Tuesday on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are back now with a special guest from the Kansas Department of Agriculture. His name is Earl Lewis, and he is our Chief Engineer. So, Earl, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Samantha. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So we've been covering a lot of different topics revolving around water this month in July, just because it was kind of a focus when it comes to extension here at K-State. So I'm really happy to have you on because that's a lot of the work that you do.
Yeah, we cover a lot of the state, a lot of water issues, obviously water rights and interstate compacts and certainly water structures, but in July and this time of year, it's irrigation and water rights.
Absolutely. So I figured today our main topic could kind of be current issues that the state as a whole is facing, things that producers are going to be affected by in the long run. And one of those things is happening today and tomorrow, the 26th and the 27th, the two hearings to renew the local enhanced management areas in western Kansas, which is a pertinent topic for sure.
Yeah, you bet. And so that's an area, like you say, we're renewing those LEMAs or having hearings on renewing those LEMAs in Hoxie and in Colby on the 26th and Hoxie on 27th. And the one in Hoxie has been in place for 10 years. So next year would be its 11th year if we go forward with it. And more GMD-wide or district-wide LEMA, the one for Colby, has been in place for 5 years. And so, we want to hear what local producers think and if the people have concerns or ready to move forward.
Absolutely. And if people are tuning in and they're not familiar with LEMAs, like you called them, but those local enhanced management areas, can you break down what those really are?
Yeah, you bet. So there are areas within a groundwater management district where we've got declining groundwater levels, really more use of water than Mother Nature puts back. And so a LEMA is where the district can propose to the chief engineer a reduction in the overall use of water. Typically, if you're in a township or a county, you're all getting kind of the same amount of water after the LEMA as everybody else. So really the goal is to try and stabilize those water levels and extend the life of that aquifer.
Absolutely. Certainly important when we think about the persistent drought we've been experiencing here across the state, but especially in that part of the state. Oh,
yeah, the western part of the state. Now, obviously, anybody that lives out there certainly knows better than I do how bad it's been, but certainly areas in southwest, south central, west central that have had maybe just a few inches of water in the last 12 months. And hopefully, we got a little bit of rain here recently, but not enough to really break the drought. And so we've got a lot of concerns with people running out of water or not being able to keep up when they're irrigating.
Yeah, hopefully that rain continues throughout this week across the state. Like you said, we've experienced some of that here, which is really nice, but not as optimistic in the coming weeks. So we're going to make the most of it while we can.
Absolutely right. We like those lower temperatures and a little rain this time of year.
For sure. I've definitely been walking with some pep in my step this afternoon. But when it comes to some other current issues across the state, Hays is currently experiencing some major water transfer issues. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So this is one that's been going on for quite a while, frankly. Hays started having trouble with having enough water supply clear back in the 80s, and they've done a really good job of conserving water, but have been looking for additional sources of supply for the last 30 years. And so in 1995, they purchased some property in Edwards County, about 70 miles south of Hays, called the R9 Ranch, and have been over the last 4 or 5 years in the process of going through the regulatory and permitting process to get that water transferred up to Hays. And it'll be transferred through pumps and pipelines if it goes through. It's kind of a two-part regulatory process. The first is looking at the water rights. They were irrigation water rights in Edwards County. And let's say if Hays was sitting right next door to the ranch, could you convert those from irrigation to municipal or public water supply use? And so previous chief engineer had indicated that you could. There's some folks locally that have some concerns and had filed suit to challenge that. Recently, the district court judge ruled that, yes, that those were legal. And now going forward, the next step is that there's a process called the Water Transfer Hearing Panel that looks at whether it's better and in more in the public interest to leave the water where it's at or allow Hayes and Russell to transfer it up that 70 miles up to their neck of the woods.
Sure. So timeline-wise, what really can people in Hayes expect?
Yeah, so this is a long, deliberative process. And so, under the best case scenario, if you're in Hayes, the shortest it gets is about 8 or 9 months, and the longest it probably gets is 20 months before you get to a decision. And then obviously if the decision is in Hayes' favor, and we're not saying it is, because we're not through that process yet of figuring out what it would be, what's in the best interest of the state. But if it is, then they've got probably another year of design and then a couple of years of construction. So you're probably looking at, 4 or 5 years before you see any water actually pumped up north.
Wow. Well, important decisions to be made, so a lot of things to weigh and consider, like you mentioned, regulatory-wise and things like that. But something hopefully to look forward to for sure for that community. Yeah,
well, certainly those folks think that. I mean, obviously there's folks down in Edwards County that are a little more concerned about seeing that water shipped out, and so we got to weigh the balance of what do we think is best for the state.
Sure, absolutely. And then moving on from just issues that just affect Kansas, but there's some interstate issues at hand right now as well.
There are. Kansas has had a history of suing other states on interstate compacts, certainly with the Ark River in Colorado and the Republican River with Nebraska and Colorado. We currently are not in any interstate litigation, which is good, and have pretty good working relationships with those folks. We recently did just come to another agreement with Colorado on the Ark to establish another account in John Martin Reservoir. And for us, we look at that as being able to maybe get a little bit more water, but maybe more importantly, water quality is a significant issue in the Ark River, whether that's the sulfates and salts or it's the uranium. And there's things that we need to be doing in Colorado or Colorado needs to be doing to try and improve that situation. And this hopefully is one of the tools we can use to help out with that.
Absolutely. In terms of the results of that being implemented, timeline-wise, what's that there? Well,
there's folks in Colorado that started signing up and putting that account to use, and so it'll probably grow over the next 5 years. It's a pilot project, so we can try it on for size. And it is a 5-year pilot project, and we'll kind of evaluate as we go through, but see after that 5-year period whether we need to make any changes or if we don't think it's working out very well, end it or go forward with it. But it's underway right now, and hopefully we'll start seeing some benefits here in the near future.
Certainly interesting for sure in terms of managing water quality and concerns regarding that. Last week was the Kansas-Oklahoma-Arkansas River Compact meeting. What did that really show outcome-wise?
So the Kansas-Oklahoma Compact on the Ark River is probably one of the friendlier compacts where we're the upstream state and we want to be good neighbors, but it's primarily a storage-based compact. So it deals with how much storage Kansas and Oklahoma can build. So think about reservoirs and those type of things in the Ark River Basin, which for us covers almost the bottom half of Kansas. We're well within our compact requirements, as is Oklahoma. And so that's really more of an enjoyable compact meeting because we're not arguing or debating how things should be, but really recognize we're both doing a good job there.
Awesome. Well, good to know about for sure. And we keep mentioning the fact that the state is in severe drought right now. I feel like I'm a broken record and listeners are probably tired of hearing me say that statement, but it's a major prevalent issue right now. So when it comes to some of the water conservation concerns across the state and some tools to mitigate that, what are really some things listeners should know about?
Well, first thing I would say, it's kind of the immediate issue I think we all need our users out there to be aware of is just making sure that they're staying in compliance with their water rights, and because we certainly don't want to get anybody on the wrong side of the regulatory stick here. That's not the part of the job that we enjoy, and I know that they don't either. So I'd encourage everybody to be checking their meters and checking to their water right quantities and making sure that they are in compliance. If they're not, if they get into a situation where they've maybe gotten past where they wanted to be, they can get a hold of one of our offices, check us online at Division of Water Resources. And we have a multi-year flex account or a MIFA in which you can spread your quantity over 5 years rather than a single year. You do take a little bit of a haircut because we look at what the average use has been over the past. So you don't really take a cut versus what you use maybe over the last 5 years. You may seem like it if you have to go over your quantity in the first year, for example. But it does allow you to kind of stay in compliance and spread that use out over time. If you've got several water rights, you need some flexibility. We have water conservation areas. Again, you can work with our offices to try and figure out what makes sense as far as how much of a reduction you want to take, how much flexibility we need to move water between different water rights. And then, of course, coming back to where we started with the local enhanced management areas, that's really a more regional approach, but it certainly does give us some tools to both reduce use for future, extend the life of the aquifer, and then also provide some flexibility in some cases as well.
Important for sure, that flexibility, especially the prolonged over 5 years kind of tool. It's a great opportunity for producers to use water when they really need it and then be a little bit more stingy with it when we have a better year, unlike what we're experiencing now.
That's exactly right. And I think almost without fail, what we see is once you give producers that tool and they can plan for that fourth or fifth year, they're going to want to hold back some of that water whenever they can, counting on having it in case there is a drought in that fourth or fifth year. A lot of our MIFAs are in their fifth year, and so those folks are really glad that they maybe save some water in this first 3 years because they have it available to them now. And so we see that pretty consistently as you give those folks some flexibility and some time to plan, then they're a little more conservative on the front end, making sure they have that protection on the back end, and that benefits us all.
Well, Earl, we've talked about a lot of topics today, but if producers are tuning in or listeners in general are tuning in and they want more information about some of the work you guys do at KDA, where can they find that at?
Well, you can certainly go to the Department of Agriculture's website and the Division of Water Resources. You can go to our field offices in Stafford or Garden City or Stockton or Topeka. Find all that information on the web and the addresses. We'd certainly welcome anybody to call or send us an email or stop by anytime, and we're always happy to help. We always want to be helpful on the front end rather than have to come out and be the bad guy and regulator on the back end.
Sure, that's never the fun part of the job.
It's not, but it's part of the job.
It is. Well, Earl, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Absolutely. Once again, that was Earl Lewis. He is with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, serving as their chief engineer, covering water conservation issues in the state and some other various topics having to do with water. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are back now with a special guest. Her name is Lavell Winsor, and she is a farm financial analyst here at K-State. And today, Lavell is joining us to talk about a new program that she has helped spearhead in the last couple of years now, and it's the Kansas Women in Ag program. So, Lavell, thanks for joining us.
Yes, Samantha. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned, you've been very active in helping put together this program along with Robin Reid. So tell us a little bit about the Kansas Women in Ag program.
Yes, so this is a program that came out of an invitation that Robin and I had to speak to a group of women in ag in the Pacific Northwest. And they had us speak about cash flows, and we were broadcasted from K-State to the Pacific Northwest to 500 women in multiple locations. And after that happened, we came up with the idea that we should bring this type of programming to our folks in Kansas so that we could reach more people. And so from that, then we developed the finances on the farm topic to take to all of our participants who wanted to come and learn more about their own farm financial skills.
Excellent. Well, what time period was that kind of at? Because I know you've been doing this for a few years now. So what year was it that this really started?
The farm financial skills, we did that in January and February of 2020, and the Pacific Northwest program was about a year and a half prior to that. And then many of your listeners may remember then we followed that up in January and February of 22 with a risk management skills that was across the state as well.
Absolutely. And I know you've had a mix of some in person, some online. What has that experience been like, taking it from online to then in person?
So the way that this program works is that Robin and I broadcast live from the university, and then we are broadcasted out to several locations across the state where producers meet in small groups. So each series that we've had, there's been about 30 locations across the state, and they've brought in somewhere between 10 to 35 participants to each location. So there's this wonderful small group dynamic that happens at those locations, and in many instances, some nice bonding and good conversation that happens among the folks at those individual sites. But what happens is we're able to broadcast this information over a wide swath so we can hit everybody and get that information to everybody's hands in a fairly efficient manner. There's no way that we would bring in, hundreds of people into one location and still be able to get the same information out to the participants.
Absolutely. Technology is such a cool thing these days. In terms of the audience that you are reaching out to, what are some of those audience members like? Are they first-generation farmers? Are they people that have an interest in agriculture but don't quite know where to start? What are some of those demographics like?
So the demographics are all types of producers. So some of those folks are first generation. Some have been farming for a very long time. So the series, as we've put them out, they are grant funded, and so they are targeted towards an underserved demographic, which part of that is women in agriculture. So the programs have been branded as Farm Financial Skills for Kansas Women in Ag and Risk Management Skills for Kansas Women in Ag. But as we discovered as we put this programming together, some people wanted to be able to bring their spouse with them, or the first series that we did was actually eligible for FSA, Farm Service Agency borrowers credit training. And so we did open that up for men to participate as well. And as I said, some of those have been first-time farmers or beginning farmers. Some have been very well-seasoned with these topics and just looking to learn a little bit more. We've even had some, for example, some daughter-in-laws and mother-in-laws that have attended together. So the overriding message that I have heard back from the locations, though, is that by those folks coming into the location together, they're able to talk about things that are happening in their communities or their challenges that they're facing, and it's a nice small group networking that happens. And a lot of friendships have come out of those because they're all people who are facing the same types of challenges on their own operations.
Absolutely a unique and special opportunity for sure. Not only that they're getting expert information delivered to them in an easily accessible way, but also, like you said, that networking opportunity, the chance to connect with others in their community. You can't beat that.
Yes, and also on top of that as well, then the local extension folks, they are actually hosting those locations and helping with the activities because each one of the topics that we do each night, then we have a hands-on activity that the participants do to reinforce whatever concept it is that we're talking about that evening. And those local extension folks help the people through with those activities. And it's just such a nice mixture of being able to bring forward a program on a very wide scale, but it definitely could not be executed without those local extension folks actually carrying it out at the local location, getting people there and serving them a meal, and then also helping them through with the activities to reinforce the understanding of the concept that we're trying to help people understand better.
I know some listeners might be listening and they're like, wow, I can't believe I missed this opportunity to take advantage of this, but these have been recorded, is that correct? And they're now online?
Yes, they are online. We do have online courses that people can sign up for at any time, and it's the same material that was presented. And then I would also say put a pin in that and watch out for this fall because we are going to have another series that will be offered across the state this coming winter. And that will be focused on agriculture land leases and all of the components that go along with that.
Amazing. This is going to be a multiple-part series that I have with you, Lavell, and Robin, hopefully, as well, will be joining us to discuss this. So that information, of course, will be coming out on Ag Today as soon as more is available, so stay tuned for that. But, Lavell, in terms of listeners that are tuning in and listening to this, if they're thinking, once again, I think this is something that I would find valuable, an opportunity that I don't want to miss out on, where can they find more information regarding this?
So where they can watch most easily would be to go to the Ag Manager website, which is www.agmanager.info, and they can watch for the upcoming news for the next series on there. That will probably be announced, I would say probably November, December or so. But also, in the meantime, if people are really interested in going ahead and signing up for one of the online courses on the Ag Manager website, if they go to the Events tab, they can sign up for the farm financial skills or the risk management skills as a course, and they can do that at any time. Once they sign up for that course, it's available to them for 6 months. It's open to take at your own pace for 6 months.
Excellent. Well, Lavell, as we're talking through this and we're sharing how amazing this program is, I want to let you highlight some of the major goals that you and Robin both have for the Kansas Women in Ag program. So if you want to share some of those, please do.
Yeah, so really the main thing is of course, I'm a farm financial analyst. And so part of my job is I go out and I work with farm families one-on-one, sitting often at their kitchen table, going through their records, trying to identify difficulties and things that they can improve in their farm finances. And so when we brought this forward to the participants, we were really just hoping to help people to gain understanding of what are these different records that they're keeping, what's the purpose of them, and how are they not just for your banker to do, but for you? How can you use this information to manage for yourself? And so that was really the farm financial part. And then the risk management skills was focused on the risk management, which, of course, we look back in the last 6 to 9 months, and we've had tons of risk on the table in agriculture. And that series was brought forward to help people to manage their risk, knowing where their break-evens were, to make good decisions on their marketing, their crop insurance, and their government programs.
When you say risks, are some of those associated with that, prolonged periods of drought, potentially, flooding risks? What really are those risks that you really broke down?
So we really looked at, from a risk management perspective, more of the pieces that impact them financially and things that they can kind of control, not so much necessarily the weather outside of crop insurance pieces. So the 4 risk management topics we had were identifying your break-evens and how to calculate that, for example, your crops, and then choosing crop insurance, how to go about making that selection, crop risk management, and then choosing your government programs, ARC, PLC, the considerations. And then with that series, we also had an optional 5th night that those same topics were all focused on, specifically onto cattle producers, specifically cow-calf operations.
Excellent. Well, Lavell, thank you so much for your time. I know that this is a program that it caught my eye when I read about it, and I hope it will listeners as well if they weren't already aware of it. But once again, just thank you for your time.
Thank you. We really appreciate you highlighting this and look forward to sharing a little more next time about the online courses and how people might go ahead and take those at this time if they would like to.
Absolutely. And of course, any of the resources that we mentioned today will be linked on our show notes page for today's program, which can be found on agtoday.net. But once again, that was Lavell Winsor. She is a farm financial analyst here at K-State, sharing about her and Robin Reid's Kansas Women in Ag program. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today.
You're listening to Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network. Along with Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. We end today's program with K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk and this week's milk lines. Triple-digit highs have been all too common across Kansas lately, creating heat stress for cattle. Mike discusses steps that dairy producers can take to help keep cattle more comfortable.
Today I'd like to visit with our Kansas dairy producers concerning heat stress in our herds. Summer is in full swing, and we're experiencing some fairly challenging temperatures as well as lack of rainfall in some areas as well. But let's talk about the heat stress on our dairy herd today. When you walk out in the afternoon, pay attention to the respiration rates in your herd. 60 breaths per minute would be a situation where we're probably starting to experience some heat stress. When you start seeing 80 breaths per minute, that's when you probably are starting to see the cows pant. You get up to 100 breaths per minute, it's probably where you'll start to see them start to drool a bit and some open mouth breathing. We get to 120 breaths per minute. Now they're really panting. We've got a fairly serious problem on our hands. So what can we do to do things in a short term to help alleviate some of the things we might be seeing during those severe times during the afternoon? Well, number one, let's make sure they have enough drinking water. Look at your water tanks. Do you have cows just standing waiting to get a drink of water? If you do, get some temporary water tanks, either at the edge of the barn or someplace maybe in an alleyway where there's a little bit of extra space. It's really, really important that animals under heat stress have adequate access to drinking water. So if you see crowding around your tanks, get some more tanks. It's fairly cheap. You can run garden hoses. You don't have to worry about them freezing up. Come wintertime, we'll just dump them out and save them for next summer. So you'll be ready for that as well. The other thing to consider is shade. Are your animals adequately shaded? Now think about the animals out in the pasture. Sometimes we have some access to some trees and other areas of shade that we maybe sometimes keep them shut off from most of the time. But during this time of the year, it's probably important that they have access to that. Yes, I understand when they have access to shade under trees, there's a chance that they will start to lay in the same area. It'll start to get messy, so we have issues with mastitis. However, we need to do the best we can do to try to alleviate some of the heat stress during these severe times. Secondly, you probably have some heifers out in these areas as well. Make sure that they have access to adequate water and then also shade. Again, temporary shade can be built. Shade cloth works very well. For mature cows, figure about 50 square foot per animal for adequate shade so they do not step on each other. For smaller animals, we can get by with somewhat less than that. But make sure you have adequate shade, whether it be under trees or whether it be portable shade. Now, let's talk about some other things that we can do to help the lactating herd. A lot of times, lactating cattle, we have access to feed line sprinklers. Make sure they're operating correctly. Make sure they cycle on and off. What if you don't have access to feed line sprinklers? Well, that's the project you could probably try to complete yet this summer, but that may not happen. Do you have the ability to spray water on them? A garden sprinkler even can work to give them some relief during the hot afternoon hours. Keeping in mind that our milking parlor is a critical place to cool cows. Fans, sprinkler systems should be installed and operating. However, in this case, maybe they're not. So, you can actually soak the animals down as you bring them into the holding pen. If you soak them down 2 or 3 times while they're waiting to be milked, that's actually adequate. Maybe you have a young person on the farm that could do that in the hot afternoon hours when you're getting started milking. That would be an excellent way to give your cows some relief if you do not have automatic sprinklers in the holding pen. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our dairy farmers to do what they can to help alleviate the heat stress in their dairy herds.
Thanks, Mike. And that'll do it for the Tuesday edition of Agriculture Today. Along with Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.